The mist hung low over Chelsea, soft and cold, blurring the glow of street lamps against the tall iron gates of a mansion. The city still slept, but one figure stirred in the shadow of wealth. A boy, no older than 16, curled beneath the gate's stone pillar. His name was Oliver Reed, and everything he owned fit inside a torn rucksack. One jumper, an old photo, and a loaf of stale bread wrapped in paper. His hair was damp, his face pale from the night frost, but he didn't move, not until the distant hum of an approaching car broke the silence. A black Bentley glided up the drive, tires whispering on the wet tarmac. The gate's sensors blinked to life, golden light spilling over Oliver's small frame. He sat up quickly, shielding his eyes. Inside the car sat Edward Hawthorne, one of London's most respected billionaires, founder of Hawthorne Developments, a name carved into half the skyline. He'd just returned from a week in Zurich, his face tight with exhaustion and indifference. But when the headlights caught the boy at his gate, he frowned. "Who's that?" he muttered. The chauffeur slowed. "Looks like a rough sleeper, sir." Edward's instinct was to ignore it. He'd seen enough of London's street corners to know how the story went. But something, a movement, a glance, made him hesitate. Oliver's hand clutched his rucksack tighter, as if afraid the light might burn him away. "Stop the car," Edward said. The chauffeur blinked. "Sir." "Stop the car." The Bentley halted. Edward stepped out, the chill biting through his tailored coat. He walked toward the boy, rain tapping lightly against his umbrella. "Hey," he said gently. "You all right there?" Oliver's eyes darted up, wary. "Sorry, sir. I didn't mean to. I'll go." Edward frowned. "Go where?" Oliver hesitated, then whispered, "Nowhere, really." The answer hung in the air like fog. Edward glanced at the mansion behind him, all glass and marble, then back at the boy. "You've been sleeping here?" Oliver nodded slowly. "Didn't mean no trouble, sir. It's just dry under that ledge." Something about the boy's politeness, his use of sir, the quiet respect in his tone, struck Edward deeper than he expected. "Come on," he said at last. "Let's get you something warm." Oliver blinked. "You serious?" Edward gave a small, amused nod. "I don't joke before coffee." Minutes later, the two sat in the mansion's vast kitchen, marble counters gleaming, a single pot of tea steaming between them. Oliver's eyes moved around the room, drinking in the kind of comfort he hadn't known in years. Edward studied him. "What's your name?" "Oliver." "And where are your parents?" "Oliver." "Dunno, sir. Mum passed when I was 10. Dad left after." Edward's jaw tightened. He nodded slowly, pouring more tea. "What do you do to get by?" "Odd jobs. Bit of cleaning. Sometimes fix bikes. Used to help my uncle with engines before he got sick." There it was, something familiar. A spark of skill, a trace of pride. "You fix things?" Oliver nodded. "Yeah. Anything that's broken, really." Edward's gaze softened. He looked down at his reflection in the tea, a man who'd built towers for a city that no longer felt like home. He didn't know why, but he said quietly, "You can stay here tonight. Guest room's empty." Oliver froze. "You sure, sir?" Edward smiled faintly. "I don't make offers twice." And for the first time in years, the boy slept under a roof, not a bridge, not a station bench, but beneath Egyptian cotton sheets, while the man upstairs lay awake, wondering why he felt something stir in his chest for the first time in a decade. By morning, Oliver was gone, or so Edward thought. That he found him outside, sweeping the driveway. "You don't have to do that," Edward called. Oliver looked up, smiling shyly. "Didn't feel right leaving it messy after you helped me, sir." Edward shook his head, half amused. "You're an odd kid." Over breakfast, Edward made a call to his head of security. "No more questions about the boy at the gate. He's my guest." For the next few days, Oliver stayed on, fixing a leaky tap, polishing the car headlights, even oiling the gate that had once been his shelter. The staff whispered, curious. The billionaire didn't explain. One evening, Edward returned home late to find Oliver in the garage, bent over an old motorcycle. "Where did you find that?" Edward asked. "It was in the corner, sir. Thought I'd try fixing it. That bike's been dead 20 years. Maybe it just needed a second chance," Oliver said with a grin. Edward laughed, a sound that surprised even him. The next morning, the engine roared to life. From then on, things changed. Edward took Oliver under his wing, bringing him to his office, showing him blueprints and plans. The boy was sharp, curious, and eager to learn. But not everyone was pleased. At a TA board meeting, Edward's business partner, Charles Whitmore, sneered. You're mentoring a street boy now? What's next? Charity housing for every beggar in London. Edward's jaw tightened. You might learn something from him. Charles, humility. Charles scoffed. It's a mistake. He'll take advantage. Edward stood, his voice cold. The only mistake I ever made was listening to men who think compassion is weakness. That night, Edward found Oliver packing his rucksack again, leaving. Oliver hesitated. I heard what that man said. Don't want you getting in trouble because of me. Edward sighed. You remind me of someone. My son. Oliver froze. You have a son? Had. Edward said quietly. He passed in an accident. Same age as you. Silence filled the room. Oliver swallowed hard. I'm sorry, sir. Edward nodded. You don't owe me anything, Oliver. But if you want to stay, stay. Not as charity. As family. For a long moment, the boy said nothing. Then he set his bag down. Thank you, sir. Weeks turned into months. The gates of Hawthorne Manor no longer hid loneliness. They framed laughter. Oliver learned business basics, engineering concepts, and etiquette from Edward. But soon came a test neither expected. One afternoon, Edward fell ill during a major corporate gala. He collapsed backstage, exhaustion and stress finally catching up. Oliver rushed to him, shouting for help. But Charles was there and saw an opportunity. Stay back, boy, he snapped. You're not family. Oliver ignored him, kneeling by Edward's side. Breathe, sir. Ambulance is on the way. When Edward woke 2 days later, the first thing he saw was Oliver asleep in the hospital chair, holding his hand. You didn't leave, Edward said weakly. Didn't plan to, Oliver murmured. Over the following weeks, Edward recovered. The boardroom, however, was restless. Charles called an emergency meeting. Edward's too old-fashioned. We need new leadership, Charles said. Edward entered mid-sentence. You're right. We do. He turned to Oliver. It's time you met your new director of community outreach, Oliver Reed. Gasps rippled around the table. Charles stood, furious. He's a child. Edward smiled faintly. So was I when I started. So was every man before he was trusted. Oliver looked terrified. Sir, I can't, Edward interrupted. You can. You've got more heart than half this room. It wasn't about power. It was about trust and belief. Months later, the city buzzed with headlines. Billionaire's program uplifts homeless youths, led by former street teen. Oliver, now dressed sharply, spoke to cameras outside a new shelter. Everyone deserves a chance. Someone gave me mine. Edward watched from afar, pride glistening behind tired eyes. That evening, Oliver found him standing at the old gate. The same place they'd first met. Strange, Edward said quietly. Used to think these gates kept the world out. Turns out they just kept me in. Oliver smiled. You opened them, sir. For both of us. They stood in silence as the rain began to fall again, soft and silver, just as it had that first night. Edward placed a hand on Oliver's shoulder. When I'm gone, promise me you'll keep them open. Oliver nodded, voice thick. I will. Weeks later, Edward Hawthorne passed peacefully in his sleep. At his funeral, hundreds gathered, employees, strangers, volunteers, but one man spoke with trembling words. I wasn't his blood, Oliver said, but he gave me a home, a purpose, and a name. I'll spend my life proving he was right about me. Years passed. The gates of Hawthorne Manor now bore a new sign. The Hawthorne Foundation, opening doors for every child. Every night, Oliver stood by those gates, watching another young boy being welcomed inside. He'd smile softly and whisper to the wind, You'd be proud, sir. The drizzle shimmered under the light, a quiet echo of the night that changed everything. Moral: true wealth isn't what you keep, it's what you give back.